Welcome to the Deep Dive Podcast, created with Google LM and brought to you by the Vesby app. The ideas shared here do not necessarily reflect those of the Vesby app, but they're worth exploring. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at something a little different. We're going to be talking about reasons why someone might choose not to attempt suicide.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at it from kind of a unique angle.
Right.
Looking at some of the research that you sent me about the realities of attempts and how often they actually fail.
Yeah. I mean, we hear a lot about, prevention and understanding factors that contribute. But this deep dive is going to take a different perspective, I think.
Right.
Looking at the consequences of surviving.
Exactly. And right off the bat, we want to say that obviously we're not endorsing. This is really just meant to be kind of a dose of reality to look at maybe some of the misconceptions that surrounds.
Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was really interested in this approach, because it's looking at something that people don't normally talk about.
Right.
And by kind of confronting that head on, maybe we can reach people in a different way.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with, the basic idea of why someone might choose not to attempt. And obviously, we know that the typical answers, right? The impact on their family, their loved ones, the potential for, future happiness and things like that.
Right.
But today we're focusing on a different aspect, and that's the reality that sometimes an attempt doesn't actually result in death.
Right. And that's where this research gets really interesting, because it highlights that, despite what we see in movies or TV, a so-called, successful suicide is actually quite difficult to achieve.
Right.
The statistics show that the survival rate is actually a lot higher than people realize.
Yeah, and what is that number? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, so studies have shown that up to the 90% of individuals who attempt suicide actually survive.
Wow, 90%.
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, so surviving doesn't necessarily mean escaping unharmed.
Right.
And that's where, things get a little bit...
Yeah, tougher to talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so what are we talking about here when we talk about surviving?
Research shows that surviving an attempt can actually lead to a life with even more pain and suffering.
Right, and it's hard to even fathom to think that they would then, survive and have to deal with more pain.
Yeah.
That's rough.
Yeah, and the research actually provides some examples of what this can look like.
Yes.
Especially with certain methods like jumping from overpasses. While it might seem like that's a guaranteed outcome, it's not always the case. Most overpasses aren't high enough to ensure death.
Wow.
What's more likely is severe injury.
Right.
Things like spinal injuries leading to paralysis.
Oh my gosh.
Shattered bones requiring extensive surgeries.
Yeah.
Traumatic brain injuries that affect, memory and speech.
Wow.
And motor skills.
That's a big deal. Yeah, it really paints a different picture of what we think about as an escape.
Yeah, it really kind of shatters the whole misconception of a quick and painless escape.
I'm not trying to be morbid or anything, but it's really about confronting this reality.
Yeah.
That sometimes suicide isn't the choice between life and death.
Right.
It's a choice between life as it is now and a potential life.
And the research also talks about how even methods that are thought to be lethal, like a gunshot to the head, are more complex and prone to failure than people realize.
Okay.
Because of things like anatomical variations and inconsistencies with firearms.
Right. And I think it's important to point out, we're not going to get into the specifics. We don't want to provide any harmful information.
Yeah.
But just to say that there's a lot more to it than people think.
Exactly. And I think the takeaway from this is that the idea that you can completely control the outcome of a attempt is a really dangerous illusion.
Right. So basically what we're saying is that if someone is considering as a way to end their pain statistically, they're more likely to end up in more pain, more suffering, and a future that could feel even more hopeless.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is that many survivors of attempts actually end up realizing that they didn't actually want to die. What they wanted was to escape the pain they were in.
So then how do we change that focus from, wanting to end life to wanting to end the pain.
Right. I think it starts with recognizing that help is available.
Yeah.
And that seeking help is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It's actually a sign of strength.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of the resources that are available, beyond the typical hotline 988 and things like that. What are some of the options that you found in the research that people might be interested in?
Well, one resource that people often overlook is just simply reaching out to someone they trust.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a mental health professional.
Right.
It can be anyone who genuinely cares.
Yeah. And I think for some people that might be a lot easier.
Right.
Than, going to a therapist or something
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about online? I mean, are there online resources?
The research mentions Reddit's Watch as a platform where people can share their feelings and connect with others. Professional help is definitely another avenue that can take many forms, like therapy text-based support. There's the crisis text line. You can reach out to your primary care physician for a referral. A lot of therapists offer sliding scale fees, and there are often resources to help cover the cost of treatment.
So it sounds like there's really a lot of options.
Yeah.
It's not just a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about finding what feels right for you.
And, even if professional help feels out of reach, there are still things people can do to help themselves.
Absolutely.
What does the research suggest in that area?
So the research suggests making small commitments to self-care.
Okay.
Like postponing any drastic action for just 24 hours.
So like watching a movie or going for a walk.
Taking a walk, watching a favorite movie, listening to calming music, spending time with a pet, anything that can just kind of gently shift your mental state.
Right.
And offer a moment of respite.
So just little things that you can do to kind of break up that cycle of despair.
Exactly.
And creating a space for a different perspective. And of course, it's important to remember that if you're feeling like you're in immediate danger and you can't keep yourself safe.
Yeah.
Seeking emergency medical care is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It's a sign of strength.
Absolutely. It's a sign that you're choosing life.
Right.
That you're choosing to prioritize your well-being.
Exactly. And it's about getting the immediate help that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about us, right? It's about recognizing that connection and the love that surrounds us.
Exactly. So to kind of recap, we've been talking about all this research that you shared about the reasons why someone might choose not to attempt.
Right.
And we've talked about how often those attempts are successful and some of the consequences that people don't really think about.
Yeah, we've really kind of debunked that myth of being like a guaranteed escape.
Right.
And instead kind of highlighted that it often leads to a much more difficult
and much tougher road.
Yeah, exactly.
And we talked about, the resilience of the human spirit.
Yeah, the potential for healing.
And the power of hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Even in those dark moments.
And I think that's something we really want to emphasize, throughout this whole conversation is the importance of seeking help.
Yeah, reaching out for support, whether it's friends, family, professionals, online communities.
It's about knowing that you're not alone.
Right.
And that there are people who care and there are resources available and there's a future out there.
And that brings us to a final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
If surviving an attempt is statistically more likely than not, how can you shift your focus from seeking an end to life to seeking an end to the pain that you're experiencing?
It's a good question.
And finding a path forward that leads to a better life.
Yeah, it's about, not ending your story, but kind of writing a new chapter.
Rewriting it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think that this whole conversation has been about really empowering people with information.
Yeah.
And helping them understand the complexity of this issue.
And to know that there's hope.
Right. To wrap things up, we just want to say that you're stronger than you think you are. You are worthy of love and happiness and a life that's full of meaning.
And if you are struggling, please reach out, connect with someone you trust.
Seek professional help. Explore the resources that are out there.
There is support waiting for you and a future full of possibility.
Choose life. Choose hope.
Thanks for joining us.